قال المصنف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him. Fasl, section. وصلاة الجماعة سنة مؤكدة. Congregational prayer is an emphasized recommendation. Here he means for the 5 prayers in particular. There are sunnah prayers that have congregation, like Eid and eclipse prayer and rain prayer. But he means here the 5 daily prayers. وَعَلَى الْمَأْمُومِ أَنْ يَنْوِيَ الْجَمَاعَةَ دُونَ الْإِمَامِ. And it is incumbent on the follower to intend to pray in congregation, not the leader. The follower in the prayer is the one who must intend congregation for the validity of his prayer when he follows, not the leader. The leader does not have to intend congregation for the validity of his prayer if he's followed. That means a person could be followed in the prayer without having an intention of being the Imam. So his prayer is valid. He's simply praying alone, but someone took him as an Imam. That's valid. He won't be getting the reward for congregation, but the other one will be, the one who intended to follow him. Ash-sharhu, the explanation. Al-aslu fi mashru'iyyati al-jama'ati al-kitabu wa-sunnatu wa-ijma'u al-ummah. The source for the sanctioning of congregational prayer is the book, that's with a capital B, the prophetic way, the sunnah, and the consensus of the nation. قال الله تعالى, said Allah, exalted is He, وَإِذَا كُنْتَ فِيهِمْ فَأَقَمْتَ لَهُمُ الصَّلَاةَ فَلْتَقُمْ طَائِفَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ مَعَكَ. If you were with them in their presence, O Muhammad, and you did the iqamah for them, for the prayer, then let a group of them stand with you and pray. Al-ayah, etc., until the end of that verse. I don't have where the verse is though. أَمَرَ بِالْجَمَاعَةِ فِي قَوْلِهِ فَلْتَقُمْ. In this verse, Allah commanded for the congregational prayer to be performed. When He said, فَلْتَقُمْ, then let a group stand with you. عِنْدَ الْخَوْفِ. This is in reference to the prayer of fear, like in the battlefield. That's a congregation prayed under duress, in fear. Yani, like there's a war going on. فَعِنْدَ الْأَمْنِ أَوْلَى. So if that's the case, to pray in congregation in fear, then in safety, more so should the congregation be performed. وَهِيَ فَرْضُ عَيْنٍ فِي الْجُمُعَةِ. Congregation is a personal obligation for Friday. Some people, they got this mixed up a little bit. Communal obligation, they said, isn't Jama'ah, isn't Friday prayer, Jumu'ah, isn't that a communal obligation? An obligation on the community? No, that's a personal obligation on the men who are not excused. Don't mix that. Friday prayer is not a communal obligation because it's a community event. Friday prayer is a personal obligation on the men, on each man who is not excused. That means that if some men do it, other men are not excused. If it were only a communal obligation, then for some men to do it would excuse others. Friday prayer is not a communal obligation. For some men to do it will not excuse others. So that makes it a personal obligation on any man who's not excused. وَأَمَّا فِي غَيْرِهَا. Now concerning other than Friday. فَفِيهِ خِلَافٌ. there is a difference in opinion about the judgment of praying in congregation. We already read what Abu Shuja said. He said, emphasized recommendation. But now we're explaining. And there's difference in opinion about the judgment of congregational prayer other than Friday prayer. As-sahihu annaha fardu kifaya. What's correct is different from what Abu Shuja said. What's correct is that it's a communal obligation to pray each of the 5 prayers in congregation. So here, communal obligation means if some do it, the rest are excused. So Friday is not a communal obligation. For Friday, if some do it, the rest are not excused. So they all have to do it. For the other 5 prayers, if some do it, the rest will be excused. If no one does it, then all of them are sinful. So that makes it a communal obligation. So Imam Abu Shuja, rahimahullah, he took the weaker saying in this case, and this is concerning the Shafi'i school, saying that praying the 5 prayers other than Jumu'ah in congregation is only an emphasized recommendation. That's a weak saying in the Shafi'i school. But that is the judgment in some other madhabs outside of Shafi'i school, that praying the 5 prayers in congregation is an emphasized sunnah. So that's the judgment in some schools, and there is a saying like that in the Shafi'i school. That's the weaker saying, though. Emphasized sunnah means a sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ never abandoned, even if he were traveling. وَحُجَّةُ مَنْ قَالَ بِفَرْضِ الْكِفَايَةِ. So can I repeat which prayers are communal? So the right saying is that none of the 5 prayers prayed in congregation is merely an emphasized sunnah. All of them, each one of the 5 prayers, 5 daily prayers, is a communal obligation, But the Friday prayer is a personal obligation on the men. And the communal obligation of the 5 prayers is also on the men, not the women. So all the 5 prayers every day, according to the strong saying in the Shafi'i school, should be prayed in congregation by some men. But on Friday, all of the men should be praying in congregation. That's clear, inshallah. وَحُجَّةُ مَنْ قَالَ بِفَرْضِ الْكِفَايَةِ. And the evidence of those who said that the judgment of the 5 prayers in congregation is communal obligation, not merely emphasized sunnah. قوله sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is what the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, ما من ثلاثة في قرية أو بدو لا تقام فيهم الصلاة إلا استحوذ عليهم الشيطان. There wouldn't be 3 men in a village or in a land, like the open land, like a plain, without any congregational prayer, but that the devil will have overcome them. If there were 3 men in a village or a plain, and they don't pray any of the prayers in congregation, then the devil has overcome them. فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِالْجَمَاعَةِ. So, perform the congregation. فَإِنَّمَا يَأْكُلُ الذِّئْبُ مِنَ الْغَنَمِ الْقَاسِيَةِ. For indeed, the devil eats the stray sheep. وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْجَمَاعَةَ تَحْصُلُ بِصَلَاةِ الرَّجُلِ في بيته مع زوجته وغيرها. And know that the congregation occurs by a man praying in his house with his wife or anyone else. لكنها في المسجد أفضل. However, it is better in the masjid, meaning for the man. Praying in congregation is better for the man in the masjid. وحيث كان الجمع في المساجد أكثر فهو أفضل. And the bigger the congregation is in the masjid, the better it is. فلو كان بقربه مسجد قليل الجمع وبالبعيد مسجد كثير الجمع فالبعيد أفضل إلا في حالتين. So, if there were a close masjid that has a small congregation and a far masjid that has a big congregation, then the further masjid is better for praying in congregation, except in two cases. أحدهما أن تتعطل جماعة القريب لعدوله عنه. One of them would be that if he doesn't attend the smaller congregation, there won't be one, then it's better for him to stay with the smaller congregation and pray so that there will be a congregation. والثانية أن يكون إمام البعيد مبتدعا. And the second case is that the imam of the further congregation, which is the bigger congregation, is a heretic. He has bad beliefs. Then better not to pray behind him. ولو أدرك المسبوق الإمام قبل أن يسلم أدرك فضيلة الجماعة. And had the latecomer to the prayer caught the imam before he says the salam, then he caught the merit of congregational prayer. Like the imam was sitting and soon is going to end his prayer. The latecomer says, Allahu Akbar, and he joined the prayer. Then he got the congregation. وَلَوْ أَدْرَكَ الْمَسْبُوقُ الْإِمَامَ فِي الرُّكُوعِ فَقَدْ أَدْرَكَ الرَّكْعَةِ. And if the latecomer catches the imam in ruku', then he caught the rak'ah. So if he catches the imam before he says salam, he caught the jama'ah. If he catches the imam while the imam is in ruku', then he caught the rak'ah. وَلَهُ شَرْطَانِ. And this has two conditions. أحدهما أن يكون ركوع الإمام معتدا به. One is that the imam's ruku' is valid in the first place. أما إذا لم يكن فلا يدرك الركعة. So if the imam's ruku' was not valid, then if you called the imam in this ruku' but his ruku' is not valid, then you didn't catch the rak'ah. وذلك كما إذا كان الإمام محدثا أو جنبا أو نسي سجدة من ركعة قبل هذه الركعة. That would be like if the imam broke his wudu, or he didn't have a ghusl, or he forgot to make sujood before in the previous rak'ah, he forgot to make sujood. لأن الركوع إذا لم يحسب للإمام فأولى ألا يحسب للمأموم. Because if the imam's if the imam's ruku' doesn't count, then more so the follower's ruku' is not going to count. والشرط الثاني أن يطمئن قبل أن يرتفع الإمام عن أقل الركوع. And the second condition is that the latecomer is still with the imam in ruku' before the imam comes up, before the imam stands back up erect. لأن الركوع بدون الطمأنينة لا يعتد به. Because bowing without being still is not valid. فانتفاء الطمأنينة كانتفاء الركوع. So missing the stillness in the ruku' is like missing the ruku' altogether. So what we're saying is, in order for you to count that you caught the raka'ah, then you need to be still with the imam in the ruku' for sure. How do you judge? You say, once you go into ruku' with the imam and you're still, you say, okay, I made it, because I'm for sure still with the imam right now. So if you went down and then the imam came up and you're not sure, then don't count that one, because you need to be sure. ولو شك هل أدرك الركوع مع الطمأنينة قبل رفع الإمام. So had one doubted, did he catch the raka'ah did he catch the ruku' with the stillness before the imam raised up? فالأظهر أنه لا يدرك الركعة. What's most apparent is that this follower did not catch the raka'ah. لأن الأصل عدم إدراكها, because the origin, if you remember, we talked about the origin. Hope you're studying these lessons. Valuable information there for you. Because the origin is the lack of catching it. Meaning what? Remember that sometimes you have an asl, an origin. When are we going to consider the origin of a case? When you have a doubt. When you have a doubt about a matter, then you need to resort back to the origin so that you can throw the doubt away and adhere to that quote unquote origin, that basis. So, for example, the origin of your prayer is that it doesn't exist. Because, like right now, I'm not praying. So, the origin of the prayer is that it doesn't exist. And therefore, the origin of bowing and prostrating is that it doesn't exist. So if you doubted if you were still with the imam in the ruku', then you need to resort to the origin. You leave out the doubt and resort to the origin. The origin is that you were not still with the imam, because the origin is that there wasn't even any ruku' for you. ولو أدرك الإمام بعد رفعه من الركوع فلا يكون مدركا لها بلا خلاف. And if a person caught the imam after he raised up from ruku', meaning he went down the ruku', but the imam already started coming up, then he did not catch that ruku' without any difference in opinion. So the difference in opinion is whether he caught it with a doubt that he was still with the imam. Was he still with the imam or he wasn't still with the imam? He's doubting. So did he catch the rak'ah or not? The most apparent saying, which is what you're going to teach the people, is that he didn't. He missed it. Especially if you're just teaching the person mukhtasar, for example. Don't go into these details. The most apparent saying is, just say to that person who's learning mukhtasar from the beginning, if you're not still with the imam, for sure, you missed the rak'ah. That's it. But if the imam started going up before you even made your ruku', then for sure, with no difference in opinion, you missed that rak'ah. ويجب على المأموم أن يتابع الإمام في الركن الذي أدركه فيه. And it's obligatory on the follower to follow the imam in whatever position he caught him. وإن لم يحسب له وإن لم يحسب فلو أدرك الإمام في التشهد الأخير وجب عليه أن يتابعه في الجلوس ولا يلزمه أن يأتي بالتشهد. So it's obligatory on the follower to follow the imam in whatever position he catches it, even if that's not going to count for the follower. Like what? Like he caught the imam in the last tashahhud, sitting for the last tashahhud. So that's not going to count for him, that sitting for the last tashahhud. That's not going to count for the follower, because he's going to have to still do a sitting for the last tashahhud. So if it counted for him, he wouldn't have to do it, right? Because it's already counted. So it's not going to count for him, but he still does it because that's where he caught the Imam. He has to, that is, when I say he still does it, means he still has to sit with the Imam. But it's not obligatory on him to say the tashahhud in this spot. ثم شرط حصول الجماعة أن ينوي المأموم الائتمام مع التكبير لأن التبعية عمل فافتقرت إلى النية فدخلت في عموم الحديث ويكفيه أن ينوي الائتمام بالمتقدم وإن لم يعرف عينه. Furthermore, the condition of the congregational prayer being valid is for the follower to intend to follow. Now, it says here in what I'm reading to you, for the follower to intend to follow when he says Allahu Akbar, but doesn't have to be when he says Allahu Akbar. It has to be before he follows the Imam. So if he's going to follow the Imam immediately, then he needs to do it when he says Allahu Akbar. Like if he joined in late. If he joined in late, so he's going to follow the Imam immediately, then he's going to say Allahu, he's going to have the intention to follow the Imam when he says Allahu Akbar. Yani, he can't follow the Imam without the intention. This is what we learned. If he says Allahu Akbar without the intention of following the Imam, his prayer will start. That's the fact. As long as it's not a prayer that must be done in congregation, like Friday prayer. If one says Allahu Akbar with the intention of starting the prayer, his prayer will start. But if he follows the Imam without an intention to follow the Imam, then it will invalidate. So he needs to have the intention to follow the Imam before he follows the Imam. That's what we learned before. What I'm reading here says different from that. Now maybe something's going to come clear as I keep reading. But just the words that are here, ثم شرط حصول الجماعة أن ينوي المأموم الائتمام مع التكبير. Furthermore, the condition for the congregation to occur is for the follower to intend to follow with the takbir. Not if it's a prayer that doesn't have to be in congregation, though. That's the issue. A prayer that does not have to be in congregation is a prayer that could be prayed alone. So if he says Allahu Akbar in a prayer that doesn't have to be in congregation, without the intention to pray in congregation, then the prayer starts and he's praying alone, even if he's standing in the line. This explainer says, لِأَنَّ التَّبْعِيَّةَ عَمَلٌ فَافْتَقَرَتْ إِلَى النِّيَّةِ. Because the following itself is it is a deed, and so it needs an intention. فَدَخَلَتْ فِي عُمُومِ الْحَدِيثِ. So it would be included in the generality of the hadith. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. The deeds are by the intentions. Following the Imam is a deed, so it needs an intention. وَيَكْفِيهِ أَنْ يَنْوِيَ الْإِتِمَامَ بِالْمُتَقَدِّمِ. And it's enough for the follower to intend to follow whoever is leading. Meaning, like, just that's his intention. Now I follow whoever's leading the prayer. That's sufficient. Of course, he has to know which position he's in. وَإِنْ لَمْ يَعْرِفْ عَيْنَهُ. Even if he doesn't know exactly who that leader of the prayer is. Who is the individual leader of the prayer? If he doesn't know who he is, he doesn't have to. And even if he didn't see him, if he didn't see him and he has no idea who he is, who is the person, but he does know which position he's in, then it's enough for him to merely intend to follow whoever's leading the prayer. فلو نوى الاقتداء بزيد مثلا فبان أنه عمرو لم تصح. So if he intends to follow Zayd in particular, if that were his intention, now I follow Zayd in the prayer. That's his intention. That's his conscious intention that he really wants to intend. فَبَانَ أَنَّهُ عَمْرٌ. But it became clear that the one who's leading the prayer is Amr and not Zayd. لَمْ تَصِحْ. Then his prayer is not valid. وَهَذَا إِذَا لَمْ يُشِرْ. That's also if he doesn't point to that one. That's also if he doesn't point to that one. So he said Zayd without pointing to him. And then it became clear that he's Amr. He really meant Zayd. It's not that he wanted Amr, but he said Zayd. He meant Zayd actually. And he didn't point at that one also. And then it became clear that it's Amr leading the prayer, then it's not valid. فلو أشار كما لو قال أصلي خلف زيد هذا فوجهان. But if he points to him by saying, and pointing doesn't have to be with the finger here, he could be pointing with his words, by saying, I pray behind this Zayd. So when he said this, that's the pointing. But it turned out to be Amr actually. فوجهان, then there are two ways. Meaning, it could be said to be valid or it could be said to be not valid. ولو لم ينوي الاقتداء انعقدت صلاته منفردا. And if a person does not intend to follow, his prayer is valid. It will commence as a solo prayer, like we already said. ثم إن تابع الإمام في أفعاله من غير نية الاقتداء بطلت صلاته. But if he follows the Imam in his moves without an intention to do so, his prayer will be invalidated. So I don't know how this got here. Ma'a takbir. I'll have to ask about that. Why is that there? Ma'a takbir. To do it with the takbir. It's not a condition. Except if it's a prayer that has to be done in congregation. Then it is a condition that the intention to follow is in the takbir. ولا يجب في صحة الاقتداء بالإمام في غير الجمعة نية الإمامة. And outside of the Friday prayer, it's not a condition for the leader of the prayer to intend to be the leader. But in the Jumu'ah prayer, it is a condition for the leader of the prayer to intend to be the leader because Jumu'ah prayer cannot be prayed without a leader. بل هي مستحبة في حقه. Rather, the intention to be the leader outside of the Friday prayer is recommended for whoever's being followed in his prayer, so that he can get the reward of congregation. فَإِن لَمْ يَنْوِ فَصَلَاتُهُ فُرَادًا. If the one who's being followed in the prayer outside of the Friday prayer does not intend to be the leader of the prayer, then he is praying a solo prayer. Wallahu a'lam, and Allah knows best.